What's up, everybody? It's your boy Blue here, and I'm finally able to do my own stuff for first time in probably about 2 months. So this week we are going to do a budget brew, one of my commander decks. As usual, one of these is for this one specifically is actually for sale. This video will be hitting on Christmas Eve, so obviously it won't be a Christmas present for anybody, but if anybody's interested, go to my Facebook page. You'll see the information there, and I have it on the Facebook Marketplace. But first, let's go ahead and go over the deck and then go from there. We're doing Dina, Soul Steeper, Black Green or Golgari or Witherbloom, whichever way you want to put it. It's a 1/3 Dryad Druid, and it's a whenever you gain life, each opponent loses a life creature with a ability to pay 1 and sacrifice another creature, and Dina herself will get +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is a sacrifice creature's power. So, there are a couple ways that people play, especially in Black Green. One of them is aristocrats, which is sacrificing creatures to drain and gain. Well, this one's kind of the opposite. This one is gain and drain. So the premise is to gain as much life as possible, so that kills your opponents. So that's the premise of the deck. I'm going to go over everything, and then I'll give you a small upgrade guide, and we'll go from there. So let me get started on that. So as I always do, I start off with the lands, and let me zoom out a little bit so you guys can see everything. So I'm starting with the lands. It's basic lands for Black Green, so we'll start off with Temple of Malady. It comes into play tap dual land, and it lets you scry 1. Golgari Rot Farm, Witherbloom Campus. I like these campuses. They let you scry 1. Jungle Hollow comes into play tapped, but you gain a life from it. Val Orchard, Golgari Guildgate, Tranquil Thicket because of the cycling, so it helps you get through if you draw it late. You don't need a land. Great, you can cycle it away. Slippery Karst, so that's done. Tranquil Thicket does it for 1 green, and Slippery Karst does it for 2. Desert of the Indomitable, again, another cycling card, and I've got the other cycle for black in here as well. Gingerbread Cabin. So here's the cool thing about Gingerbread Cabin. When it comes into play, if it comes into play tapped or not... Oh, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase it. When it comes into play untapped, you create a food token, and that's a way to gain life. That triggers Dina. Baron Moor. The cycling cards for black. Polluted Mire. Desert of the Glorified. Witch's Cottage lets you bring a creature back. Warp Landscape lets you thin your deck out by going to get lands. Mirror Landscape, same thing. Radiant Fountain, obviously it's in here because it enters the battlefield and you gain life. Triggering Dina again. And then Basic Swamps and Farce. And remember, for the exact number of these and everything, in every video that I do for my commander decks that I make and sell, there will be a deck list in the description, so keep that in mind. Alright, next section we're going to go into is ramp. Not a lot of options other than, we're in green. I'm going to do an additional one, though. I added in here Pristine Talisman because it's a mana rock, but whenever you tap it, you gain a life, even if you don't use the mana. So Field Trip, Beneath the Sands, Search for Tomorrow. All green land searchers are ramp, if you will. Far Wanderings helps you go get 3. Natural Connection. And I actually included Anissa's Renewal in here just because it lets you go get 3 basic lands. Now, it also helps you because it gains you life, so it triggers Dina again. So that is the ramp section that I included in this build. Again, everything will fit Dina for the build and the style that I wanted it to play. Up next, we're going to go into creatures, and you're going to see a theme here. Most of the creatures are going to have an ability to gain life, one way or another. There are many ways you can do it. You've got Lifelink, you've got when they enter the battlefield, you've got landfall abilities, so we're going to go over what I included, and I'll give you better options or more costly options, monetarily speaking, in the upgrade guide. So we started off with a Banehound. It's a 1 to cast 1/1 Lifelink or haste. It's always pretty cool to be able to attack first turn. So Thirsting Shade, again, Lifelink, and then they can get bigger as you go. Valentine, the Dean of the Vein, more Lifelink, also as Menace, is a 1/1. And then the other side is Lizette, Dean of the Root. And it says on this one, and remember, we're a life gain deck. It says whenever you gain life, you may pay 1. And if you do, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. And those creatures gain trample. So it actually helps you because all the creatures you have in here, you can overrun the board. Alright. Dagger Dome Imp. It's a 1/1 flying lifelink. Vampire Opportunist, not lifelink, but the ability here is each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. That way so you're going to make everybody lose 2 life. You're going to gain 2, and then Dina's going to do 1 again. Child of Night for the lifelink. Boot Nipper, obviously you would choose, depending on your situation and the board state, you're going to choose lifelink. Smitten Swordmaster has lifelink. The second ability, or the adventure ability, is not really going to play too much into this one. I don't think there's a lot of knights in here. Nocturnal Feeder, so it's a 3 to cast 2/1 flyer. When it dies, each opponent will lose 2 life and you gain 2 life, and again, that'll trigger Dina. Farbog Revenant, so it's a Skulking Lifelinker. That's 3 to cast and a 1/3. Baleful Amit, again a 3 to cast Lifelinker, but this one's 4/3, and when it comes into play, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature you control. So, one thing about that, if you were to play, let me bring it out just so you guys can see it. If you played this side, Lizette, when you do a +1/+1 and a -1/-1 counter on a creature, they cancel each other out. So when they cancel each other out, basically what that means is they don't exist. So keep that in mind as well. Scrib Nibblers, so this one's a little different as well. It's a 3 to cast 1/1. You can tap it to exile the top card of target player's library. That's quite important. And then if that card was a land card, you gain a life. And then the landfall ability on this one is that whenever you play land, you can untap it. So use the ability before you play your land for the turn, and then use the ability again. All right. Blood Hunter Bat, flyer for 4, 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, target player loses 2 life, and then you gain 2 life, and then that'll trigger Dina, and everybody will lose 1. Like I said, gain and drain, baby. Highway Robber, same thing. When it enters the battlefield, comes into play, whatever. You gain 2 life, and target opponent loses 2 life. Bushmeat Poacher, so it's a 4 to cast 2/4. You pay 1 and tap it. You can sacrifice another creature and then gain life equal to that creature's toughness and then draw a card. So this does some of the things that are weaknesses. So green and black don't really have a whole lot of options for drawing cards, and the ones they do have, you know, it's not blue. So this is an option to gain life, hit people with Dina, and draw a card. Epicure of Blood, so whenever you gain life, each opponent loses a life. You can see where that's going. Jedi Offshoot, so it's a 1 to cast 0/3 defender, so it's a wall, technically. And then it's got a landfall, like I was telling you earlier. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, you gain a life. Pretty simple. Healer of the Glade, when it enters the battlefield, gain 3 life. It's 1 to cast 1/2. Kazandu Nectar Pot, same thing as the Jedi Offshoot. It has landfall. Whenever land enters the battlefield under control, you gain a life. So your lands can now start killing your opponents. Overgrown Arch, another wall. It's a 2 to cast 0/4. Has Defender again, and then you can tap it to gain a life, or you can pay 2, sacrifice the Overgrown Arch, and learn. You're probably not going to use that. You want to be able to keep gaining life. Scavenging Ooze, 2 to cast 2/2. So it's a bear. For each green you put into it while it's in play, you can exile target card from a graveyard, so that could be your opponent's graveyards, and then put a +1/+1 counter on Scavenging Ooze, making it bigger, and then gain a life, and then triggering Dina. Does anybody else see that it looks like a circumcised penis, by the way? I'm just throwing that out there. It's a weird picture. Next is Honor Troll, so it's a 3 to cast 2/3 with Vigilance. And then if you would gain life, gain that much life +1. It does not trigger Dina an additional time when that happens. It just makes the number that you do gain larger. It doesn't have separate triggers. And then Honor Troll also gets +2/+1 as long as you have 25 or more life. You begin the game at 40, and you should be well above that by the time this gets played, or at least somewhat above it. So it's always going to be a 4/4. Springmane Servant, 3 to cast 3/2, and then when it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life. Same thing with the Brush Strider. It's pretty much, I think they're an identical card, except for one's a beast and one's an elk. So, Grazing Gladeheart has a landfall ability that also is the life gain, but this time you get to gain 2 life instead of 1. Centaur Nurturer, so you can tap it to add a mana of any color, so that's pretty good in case you're short on black, so at least you have that, but when it enters the battlefield, you gain life, and it's also a 2/4, so it has a big ass to block. Fierce Switchstalker, so it's a 4 to cast 4/4, great stats right off the bat. It has trample, not relevant unless you're doing combat damage, and then it also creates a food token when it enters the battlefield, which of course you can sacrifice to gain life, and that triggers Dina. Arborback Stomper, it's a 5 to cast 5/4, has trample, and when it enters the battlefield, you gain 5 life. Ezerfruit Channeler, so that one's an interesting one. It's 6 to cast. It's a 4/6 with reach, so it helps you block flying because that's one of the weaknesses. Creatures with spells you cast cost X colorless less to cast, where X is the amount of life you've gained this turn, and you can tap it to gain 2 life, and it makes your creatures cheaper to cast, unfortunately not itself, and you gain life with it every turn, or every one of your, after you untap, so. Palaka Worm, so it's a 7 to cast 7/7 Trampler, it's beefy, and when it enters battlefield, gains 7 life, and when it's put in the graveyard, draw a card, so it does everything you want for this deck. Moldering Carrick, so 4 to cast 3/3 Trample Lifelink. Simple, plain, has Lifelink, that's all that matters. Witherbloom Pledge Mage, I want to make a quick comment about, there's another Witherbloom out there that when you cast a spell, you gain a life. I don't know where the hell any of them are. I don't have them, so that's one of the things that you should add. But this one has Magecraft, and whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, you gain a life. There's a cheaper one, I think that's a 1/1 or 2/2. I believe it's a 2 to cast 2/2 that does the same thing. I can't find it. It's an uncommon. Absolutely add it if you can. And the last creature is Azoni, the Thousand-Eyed. So it's 2 green, 2 black, 2 for a 2/3. It has undergrowth, so that means for him, whenever it enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 black and green insect creature token for each creature card in your graveyard. And then for a black and a green, you can sacrifice another creature, gain a life, and draw a card. Does everything you want to do. Puts out defenders, helps you sacrifice things, helps you gain life, helps you draw a card, triggers Dina, all that good stuff. So we're moving on. So up next, we're going to go into spells. We're going to have two types of spells. We're going to have ones that help advance the idea of Dina, and then we're going to have, ones that help you in general, do things that you need to do in Commander. We're going to start with Vicious Rumors. It deals a damage to each opponent. They discard a card, then they put the top card of the library into the graveyard, and you gain a life. So the damage, gain life thing, that's for Dina, and then the other stuff is just a bonus, especially for one converted mana cost, or mana value, if you will. Sovereign's Bite, same theory. So target player loses 3 life, you gain 3 life. So one person loses 3, you gain 3, and everybody loses 1. And that's the theme here in the next couple cards, so just keep that in mind. So this is Alms of the Vein. It's 3 to cast, has madness of 1, so if you're discarding a card, choose this one, pay 1 black, and then target opponent loses 3 life, you gain 3 life, Dina triggers. Siphon Soul deals 2 damage to each opponent, and then you gain life equal to the amount of damage it did. Siphon Life has Retrace, and that's important. I have to go over that. So it's 3 to cast, target player loses 2 life, you gain 2 life, and then you can retrace it. Retrace it actually is really good. In Commander, when you're discarding a land card, sometimes you're flooded out. This card can help get rid of some of that flooding and actually give you usefulness. So you retrace this card, gaining life, doing damage, and then doing damage to everybody. Absorb this, 7 to cast. I know it's expensive, sorry. It makes target player lose 4 life, you gain 4 life. Dina triggers, everybody loses 1, but you can cycle it away to go get a basic land. So it has two things. So if you get it early and you're short on land, cycle it away. If it's late game, cast it for what it does. And finally, on this form of card, we have Witherbloom Command. It's 2 to cast, so you can choose 2. A player can mill 3 cards, then you return a land from your graveyard to your hand. Could be useful. Destroy target non-creature, non-land permanent with mana value 2 or less, so kills those arcane signets and soul rings. Target creature gets -3/-1, so it can kill something that has 1 toughness. Or target opponent loses life and you gain 2 life. Obviously, this is the one you're going to choose each time, and then whatever's going on in the game, you'll choose the other mode. So next, we're going to go into utility. That's the word I was looking for earlier, by the way, utility. So here's the utility stuff, and this is going to encompass a whole bunch of other things on the spell side. So you got Bacon to a Pie. This is really funny. I love this card just for the fact that it has so many different undertones to it. So 4 to cast, instant, destroy target creature. Always good to be able to have targeted removal. But then it creates a food token if we can't tell what that's from. And then you can sacrifice the food token and gain life. Feed the Serpent. Exiles a creature or planeswalker for 4, and that's important. The exile is important because that gets around indestructibility and all that other stuff. Adventurous Impulse. Let me explain a little bit about this real quick. I've noticed that green has card draw, but just in a different form. The next couple cards are going to be green's technically card draw, but in different forms. So you look at the top 3 cards of your library, reveal a creature or land from among them, and put it in your hand, and put the rest on the bottom of your library. Technically, that's drawing a card. It doesn't trigger anything that says draw a card, but it's drawing a card. Same thing with Seek the Wilds, only you get to look at 4 cards. Adventure Awaits, you get to look at 5 cards. Track Down lets you scry 3, which is essentially the same thing as looking at the cards and putting them back. Broken Bond, because you always need targeted artifact and enchantment removal, and it lets you put a land from your hand into the battlefield. Crushing Canopy, this is here because your weakness is going to be to some flying creatures. So this does either destroying a creature with flying or destroying an enchantment, and the same thing with Crushing Vines, it destroys either a creature with flying or an artifact. You see where I'm going with that. And then Return to Nature, because it has 3 modes, and the third mode isn't as important unless you're playing against somebody who's playing either self-mill or recursion. It exiles a card from a graveyard, but it also destroys an artifact or enchantment. So those are the spells that I've included into this deck. I'm going to move on to the enchantments. It's not a lot of them, but they all have some importance. All right. So Dogged Pursuit. It's an enchantment that stays on the battlefield in every end step that you have. Yeah, end step. End step, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. Obviously, that triggers Dina. Ill-Gotten Inheritance, so at the beginning of your upkeep instead of your end step, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and you gain a life. You can also pay 6. Sorry, I thought that was a 3. Sacrifice it, and it'll deal 4 damage to target opponent, and you can gain 4 life. All right. Sanguine Bond. Obviously, it's in here because whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. This is a life gain deck specifically geared towards Dina, which has this ability anyway. Retreat to Kazandu is actually, it's funny. All those creatures that do it, this is the enchant. Those are on a stick. They're all basically just Retreat to Kazandu on a stick. So it's a landfall ability. You get to choose to either put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, or you can gain 2 life. With Dina out, you're going to obviously choose to gain a life. If you're doing a creature attack because Dina's not working or she keeps getting hated off the board, you start making your creatures bigger and then start attacking. All right? So that's the enchantments. There wasn't a whole lot. And then the last part, it's a couple of artifacts to go with it. I didn't have any planeswalkers. None of them really fit the deal that would fit into the $40 budget. So let's go with this. Here's an interesting one. Tablet of the Guilds. So this one says, when it enters the battlefield, you choose 2 colors. In this deck, you're going to choose black and green. Whenever you cast a spell, if it's at least one of the chosen colors, you gain a life for each of the chosen colors. So if you cast Dina with this out, you gain 2 life off of it. Simple and easy. Luxa River Shrine. So it's a 3-cast artifact. It starts off at you pay 1, tap it, and gain a life, and then put a counter on it. A brick counter. Don't really care what the counter is. Just put a counter on it. And if you have 3 brick counters on it, you can just tap it to gain 2 life. So it's repetitive life gain, so you can trigger Dina. And last but not least, Chalice of Life. This one's a fun one too. So you can just tap it to gain a life, and if you have at least 10 more life than your starting life total, they have it worded like that for Commander, I'm assuming. You can transform it if you do, which you probably will. And then you can just start throwing the damage out. You can just tap it to have target player lose 5 life. So that's the deck in a nutshell. Not really much else to explain about it. It's literally just life gain. Try to gain as much life and drain your opponents off the board. So if you have any questions about it, go ahead and ask. I'm going to go into the upgrade section now. Alright, so as far as upgrade goes, we always start with the lands. If you've ever watched any of my videos, you know I always start with lands. That's how I always start. That's how I actually do my order. It's always lands, then creatures, and so forth. So we'll start off with a Castle Locthwain, because you're going to gain a lot of life, so you might as well use that life for good. Drawing cards is one of the best things you can do. You can go with High Market to be able to sacrifice creatures to gain life. If they're going to die anyway, Sacrificial Lambs to make Dina work. Alright. Spring Jack Pasture. It's a land that lets you create goats. I've used it in Purphoros many a times. So you can sacrifice the goats to add mana to your mana pool or something like that. I'll have it up here so you can see. I can't remember exactly how it's worded, but I'll have it up there so you can see it all. Sapseep Forest, so you can just tap it to gain life. It's a land that lets you do it. It's a little harder to remove, so it's pretty good. Mirren of the Moaning Well is an option you can do. I've never really suggested that before, so I will have that up here so you can take a look at that one as well. You've got Witch's Clinic, which will give Dina specifically, because it only gives a commander lifelink, so if it does damage, you'll gain life, and then her ability will trigger. War Room, I've mentioned this many a times, so it's just good card draw, especially in a deck like this where you're life gain. So it deals damage to equal to the number of colors your commander has. This one has 2. That's a pretty low price to pay in a life gain deck to draw a card. And then, of course, we've got good old standards that I suggest, even though they're not viable because most people can't afford them. But you've got a Guy's Cradle, an Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth, and a Cabal Coffer, so you can ramp up a little bit with all that. All right, so those are just a couple of the lands that I would suggest that would help this deck tune it up a little bit and make it run like a fine, machine. Next, we're going to do the ramp. Okay, so as far as the ramp goes, I mean, we're in green. It's pretty simple. I've got a whole bunch of spells in here. You're just going to swap them out, and you're going to put things in there. And the reason why I have to mention these is because they are monetarily a little higher price than the ones I included. So you've got things like 3 Visits, Farseek, and Spoils of Victory. And I got to make a mention that Spoils of Victory needs a freaking reprint, like, now, all right? And I'll have all 3 of them up there so you can take a look at what they do. You've got Nature's Lure. And then, of course, you can always go into the Mana Rock section because we're in 2-color decks. Some of these will work. So Soul Ring will work. Not obviously for Dina because she's only colored mana. But I'll still put in there for other stuff. You've got Arcane Signet. I'm now starting to suggest Arcane Signet for 2-color decks. It would work especially in this case. And then Talisman of Resilience is the black and green talisman. When you tap it, you can tap it for colorless, and it's free, or you can tap it for green or black, and it does damage to you. So those are just a few of the suggestions. There are others. Whatever you have, you can use. If you have to go out and get some, those are the ones I suggest. So as for everything else, I'm going to move on to the creatures. All right, so as far as the creatures, I got a bunch of them here. I'm just going to rattle off a couple of them. I'm going to tell you what a couple of them are good for. I'm going to have a couple of them up here for you to see. So we're going to start off with Cavalier of Night. Cavalier of Night's kind of like, it's a lifelinker, it's a sack outlet, it's graveyard recursion, it does everything you want. All right, next we're going to mention Eradicator Valkyrie. It flies, it has lifelink as well, it has hexproof from planeswalkers, and then of course the boast is a forcing of opponents to sacrifice a creature. So again, does a lot that you want. Crick, I don't know if I'm saying that, Carrick, I don't know, of Yawgmoth. Great addition to this deck for a couple reasons. So, it has lifelink, so it gains your life, does what Dina wants. It gets your life higher for its ability, which is that it gets bigger when you cast a black spell. and then you can pay life to cast spells, which is a great resource since remember in Commander life is a resource. All right. Kalidas, Trader of Get, it's lifelink as well. It helps you sacrifice creatures, and when creatures on your opponent's side die, you get them. Always good, especially with sack fodder. All right. Murderous Rider, again, another lifelinker, and then when it comes into play, you can destroy a creature on your opponent's side. When it dies itself, it also shuffles back into your library, so it's a reusable. Now, in a 100-card deck, it's not that reusable, but at least it's better than nothing. You've got Veto. Obviously, you can give all your creatures lifelink now. It's always a good thing, and then, obviously, it has the ability just like Sanguine Bond, where when you gain life, opponents lose life. So there's that. And one of the newer cards that just came out, one of the commander sets, a Blossoming Bog Beast. So that one helps you gain 2 life when it comes into play, or actually when it attacks, sorry. That one gives you 2 life when it attacks, and it makes your dudes bigger, and gives them trample. Pretty much, it's the backup plan, all right? Courser of Crewfix is another cool one. So that one has landfall ability for the most part, so whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain a life, and it lets you play additional lands, so it helps you ramp a little too. What else do we got here? Ayara, First of Locked is always a nice one. It helps you to mill other people's decks whenever a creature goes to the graveyard from, I think it's from library or from play. I don't think from hand, but it helps you gain a life. I think it does a damage and you gain a life. So that's kind of like aristocrat style where it's drain and gain. But on this one, when you gain, you also drain again. So always good. We've got Death Greeter. Whenever a creature on the opponent's side dies, you get a life. Perfect for Dina. What do we got here? Oh, Beladros Witherbloom. Always nice. So Beladros has those, cool things like, it flies. It creates 1/1s each turn, and it's each turn. So remember that. And then when they die, they give you life. So that's awesome. And then you can also pay 10 life, which, again, is a resource that you're going to have plenty of, in this deck. To untap all your lands, and you can only use that one time each turn, but it's definitely helpful. All right. Sproutback Trudge, another of the newer cards. It costs less to cast for each life you've gained. And then at the end step, you can cast it from your graveyard if you've gained life that turn. So it recurs itself. It can be a blocker. It's an attacker. You can just, if you're gaining life, it's a great card. What else we got here? Cryptghast. So it helps you. It has. What the hell is the name of the ability? I don't know why I keep forgetting the name of this ability. But the one where you pay a white or a blue or a black. And remember, reminder text doesn't count. Every time you cast a spell, you can pay a white or a black, and then your opponent loses a life, you gain a life. Triggering Dina again. Extort. That's the name of it, Extort. All right. What else do we got here? We're moving along here. Essence Warden, so whenever it's one of the elves that people use in elf decks. In this deck, it's one of a couple of green creatures that whenever you play a creature spell, you gain a life. Triggering Dina. There's another one here. It's called, what's it called? Prosperous Innkeeper. Same thing. And then Sangromancer. Now, I actually wrote this late, so I'll let you know. It's a flyer. When an opponent's creature dies or they discard one, you may gain 3 life. I forgot about its existence, and when I was doing my research, it didn't pop up on any of my searches. But it's a good addition. I don't have it up here. I won't have it up here, but, just look it up if you need to on the Gatherer or MTG Familiar or whatever you have. So, but that's, the essentials that I'm suggesting that you can do. There's another direction you can go in. You can change this all up and make it purely aristocrats. So then you're adding in all the dudes or creatures that are aristocrat style. So there's a bunch of them. I'm not going to name them all because I'm sure I've named them in a bunch of other videos, but there's that. Let's see. Yeah, so that's it. That's what I got for the creature upgrades. If you, again, have any questions about that, you can go ahead and send me a message or email. I'll give you all the contact information at the end of the video. And worst case scenario, you can skip to it, send me an email, and come back. All right? But for now, we're going to move on to the spells. So over the years, I've explained that when you're in black-green, it has a plethora of things you can use in Commander as far as spells, enchantments, and all that stuff. So I'm just going to rattle through the spells part and then get to the enchantments real quick. For spells, you have targeted removal. Black is a king of targeted removal. Green, the addition of green to some of those spells has brilliant effects. So you have cards that really shine. So you have things like Abrupt Decay or Assassin's Trophy, something a little not recent but a little more recent. Murder itself, and then all the plethora of targeted removal that black has that are like Murder. And then you have a really cool one in Putrefy. So those are the targeted removals that I would add to this deck if you wanted to change some out. They're a little cheaper to cast than the ones in here, but they're a little bit more monetarily expensive. Black also has some cool effects with board wiping. So if you need to do a reset, you've got Damnation. Obviously, I mention that every time, but you've got cool ones like Toxic Deluge where you can make things get -X. What that does is kills indestructible creatures. That's always a good thing. You have Essence Pulse, and Essence Pulse is a thing where you gain 2 life, and then all creatures get -X equal to the amount of life you've gained. So akin to Toxic Deluge, but a little bit cooler effect. All right. Culling Ritual. That's what it is. Culling Ritual. That destroys each non-land permanent, and that's important. Permanents. That's artifacts, enchantments, all that stuff. Converted mana cost 2 or less, and then the cool thing, it ramps you. You get to gain a green or a black mana for each thing destroyed. Pretty cool. And then you've got Gaze of Granite. I've used it in Muldrotha, I believe it is. It destroys, it's an X spell. You destroy all permanents, converted mana cost X or less. Really good stuff, all right? There's other things. So you've got Tutoring. Black is the king of tutoring. But a new card from Crimson Veil just was printed, was Dig Up. So it allows you to search for a land, or if you pay the Cleave cost, I believe it's called, you can search for anything. It's a little more expensive, but if you put that in your land ramping spells, the bonus is if you draw it later, you can also make it a regular tutor, all right? And of course, there's always the demonic tutor, the vampiric tutor. Green gives you worldly tutor to go get a creature, all that stuff. Next, you're going to want card draw. Harmonize is the king of green draw. It's 4 to cast, draw 3 cards. Pretty simple, but very effective. Black has a lot of spells that do draw 2 cards, lose 2 life stuff. The best one so far is Night's Whisper. It's a black and colorless sorcery. I think it's target player or you. I can't remember on Night's Whisper, but each one of them does either you or target player. Obviously, you're going to target yourself unless that 2 damage can kill your opponent. And then you got cool little toys from Black, like Exsanguinate. Like if you're going to do some kind of a sacrificial lambs kind of thing, and there's a card that I'm going to suggest a little bit later that will help you gain some more mana, you can use Exsanguinate to... This is really cool because Dina will... If Dina is out and you Exsanguinate, it's a double. So if you do it for, say, 10, so each opponent loses 10 life, you gain 10 life. Dina triggers, they all lose 10... Oh, no, I'm sorry, it's only 1 because it's not separate ones. It triggers Dina only once. Keep that in mind. Sorry, got excited there. Got ahead of myself. And then the last spell I'm going to mention, it's one that I don't mention often just because, well, I mean, I have it in one deck, and it's because I only have 1 copy. I don't know how much it costs. I know it's definitely more than necessary for a $40 budget deck, but Torment of Hailfire is definitely a pretty cool card. I will have it up here so you can see it. So you put X into it. Each opponent has to sacrifice a creature or a permanent. I can't remember. I'm going to have it up here so you can read it exactly. They sacrifice something or discard a card or lose 3 life, whichever one they choose. So it can get pretty nasty pretty quickly. So those are some of the spells that I would suggest to put into this deck if you do purchase it and you want to upgrade it a little bit. That's a starting point for you. As far as any questions or concerns, again, I'm going to mention this after each section. Just send me an email, go to the Facebook page, whatever. Other than that, I'm going to move on to the enchantments. Now, I know that I mentioned just a little bit ago that Black and Green have a plethora, a myriad, if you will, of a lot of really good enchantments, spells, stuff like that, that are really fit for Commander, and I'm going to just whittle down a little bit of that list right now, all right? Card draw, the king of enchantment card draw. Outside of Ristic Study, for Black, I mean. Necropotence, great addition, especially since you're gaining life, so the life that you have to spend to draw those cards is negated. Phyrexian Arena is another one that you can use. It's the enchantment that lets you draw a card at the beginning of your upkeep, but you lose a life. In a life gain deck, it doesn't matter. Guardian Project, I will mention that in every green deck. So Guardian Project is pretty much meant for Commander because its drawback is that you can't have anything that's the same. Hello, that's what Commander does. Then you've got the combination of Sylvan Library and Abundance that I've mentioned multiple times, so I won't show you that. If you need to know what that is, just send me a message. Cryptolith Right's pretty cool because all those creatures now become Birds of Paradise, so that you can ramp up a little bit. Growing Rights of Itlamak is the poor man's guy's cradle, so it comes into play. You can look at the top 4 cards of your library, get a creature out of it, and then when you have a certain amount of creatures, like it's 5 or more, it turns into a guy's cradle. Always good. Black Market helps ramp you a little bit too. Every time a creature dies, you put a counter on it at the beginning of your pre-combat. I say first because red has ways to have another one. We're not in red, so it doesn't matter. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you add X black to your mana pool equal to the number of counters on it. Retreat to Hagra. I love Retreat to Hagra. Whenever you play land, each opponent loses a life, you gain a life. Triggering Dina. Let's see what else here. Bloodchief Ascension is a cool one. I'm going to have that one up there so you can read it. It's actually very longly written. Basically what it means is you get counters on it. Whenever you got enough counters on it, whenever a card goes to the graveyard from anywhere of an opponent's, they lose 2 life, you gain 2 life. Dina triggers, you know the deal. Life gift, whenever you play land, gain a life. Obviously, that's just simple. They actually repeated that in a much better form with Druid class. Obviously, that the first ability is what I care about the most. Whenever you play land, gain a life. The Meat Hook Massacre is a new one that was just printed. It's pretty good. I'm not sure if you've heard about it yet, though. I'm going to have it up there if you haven't. I don't think you haven't, though. Let's see what else we got here. Bastion of Remembrance. Really, in the last 5 years, that's one of the best enchantments that I think that they've actually made new, besides the Meat Hook Massacre. It's an aristocrat's dream. It's a drain and gain dream. It's a gain and drain dream. It's just all around good. Again, I'll have it up there if you don't know what it is. Dictate of Erebos, so whenever a creature of yours dies, your opponents have to sacrifice a creature. Always good. Vampiric Rites, you can pay to sacrifice a creature, gain a life, and draw a card. I don't have to tell you why that's good. And Revenge of Ravens is an interesting one. So there's, I think, 2 or 3 cards that do this in black. Whenever a creature an opponent controls attacks you or a planeswalker you control, they lose a life, you gain a life. And again, I don't have to tell you why that's really good in Dina. So those are just a couple, and I could go on forever with enchantments for black and green that would be good in a deck like this, because that's pretty much what the 2-color combination does. So if you have any questions, again, send me a message. Otherwise, I'm just going to move on to the artifacts. So I'm going to start off with telling you that the first 2 are going to be does. And the reason why I say this is because I do believe that every single commander deck in existence will use these 2 cards if they match the colors. All right? First one, Great Henge, obviously. It gets cheaper to cast. While it's expensive to cast at first, it gets cheaper as you go. It helps you gain life. It helps you draw cards whenever you cast a creature, blah, blah, blah. Really good. Bolas's Citadel's next. Using your life as a resource to cast stuff off the top of your library is a duh. All right? We're going to move on from that. I have to suggest that. I'm going to have them up there so you can see them, read them. They're just expensive monetarily for a reason. Next, Bontu's Monument is one that I really like. Whenever you cast a creature spell, your opponents lose a life, you gain a life. Cosmos Elixir, I'm going to mention. It is, what it does is at the end of your draw step, if your life is higher than your starting life total, draw a card. If it's not, gain 2 life. So it gives you whatever, it's one of the 2 things. If for some reason your life total is not high enough, gain 2 life, Dina triggers. If it is higher than your starting life total, draw a card. I mean, it's just perfect for this. What else we got here? I'm going to mess up this name. Alhammaret's Archive. Sure. Alhammaret's Archive. If you gain life, gain twice as much instead. If you would draw a card other than on your draw step, draw 2 instead. Pretty simple. Next, I'm going to mention Aetherflux Reservoir. Whenever you cast a spell, gain a life for each time you cast a spell this turn, and you can pay 50 life to deal 50 damage. In a life gain deck, that could be a finisher. All right. You've got the altars. You've got both altars. You got Phyrexian Altar, which you can sacrifice a creature to gain a mana of any color, or you've got Ashnod's Altar, which you can sacrifice a creature and gain 2 colorless. That's the card I was mentioning earlier, was if you want to do something where you sacrifice some of the guys that come back, gain some mana, play some X spells, you get the idea. Profane Memento, new one that I've never mentioned before. So, creatures in your opponent's graveyard. Okay, so if a creature goes to your graveyard, to your opponent's graveyard, let me start over. If a creature goes to, if a creature an opponent controls or owns goes to a graveyard from anywhere, that includes from the library, from the hand, whatever, you gain, what is it, a life, 1 life, and that triggers Dina. All right, and then I haven't mentioned this before. I put it in some of my decks, but I didn't mention this as far as Commander goes. You have Elixir of Immortality. So this one's pretty cool if you haven't seen it before. I'm going to have it up there because it's actually pretty cool. So it's like Felden's Cane if you don't know what that is, but I don't know what to tell you. 1 to cast artifact, 1 tap, sack it, gain 5 life, shuffle it itself and your graveyard into your library. So it saves itself. It can actually, so Felden's Cane exiles itself when you use it. This one shuffles itself back in. It doesn't even go to the graveyard and stay there when you use it. It's pretty good, but the gain life is the thing I'm talking about here, but it also gets you your stuff back if you need it. So those are just a couple of the artifacts. Again, if you need to ask me any questions, go ahead and send me a message, but I'm going to move on to the walkers. Alright, so I've got about 6 walkers to mention, so I'll just rifle through them real quick, tell you a couple of them, put a couple of them up, and then we'll be almost finished. So first one to mention is Vraska, the Golgari Queen. She does everything you need her to do. So she has a way to sack permanents to gain life, has like draw cards. Oh yeah, that's right. You sacrifice a permanent, gain life, and draw cards. You can destroy your opponent's low converted mana cost permanents, or you can make an opponent just lose life. Does everything you want her to do. Have her up here, take a look at her. Professor Onyx, whenever you cast a spell, opponents gain lose 2 life, you gain 2 life. I can't tell you. I don't want to have to tell you. She cycles through your deck a little bit too to help you get to the answers you need. I mean, she just does what you need to do as well. Soren Markov. This one's a little cheap, so it does damage something you gain life, which is why I would put in here. But the second ability is kind of shitty. It just puts somebody's life total at 10. So it's really there for the first ability, but man, that second ability can't be denied. We got Nissa Voice of Zendikar, puts out tokens, makes them bigger. The ultimate's what you're wanting, though. It helps, you can gain life off of it and draw cards, and that's kind of what you want to do. So that's why I mentioned Nissa Voice of Zendikar. One I haven't mentioned often, but I have mentioned is Ob Nixilis of the Black Oath. It makes opponents lose life while you gain. It makes an emblem that sacrifices your creatures to gain life and draw cards. Pretty much fits the theme of the deck. And the last thing I'm going to mention, Soren the Mirthless, the new card from Crimson Veil. It puts cards in your hand at the cost of life, which you don't really care about. It creates lifelink creatures and deals damage and you gain life. Again, does everything you want it to do. So those are the 6 planeswalkers I'm going to mention. If there's obviously more, but those are the ones that I could see putting in a deck like this that would make it a little bit better. So, and once again, if you have any questions, you know what to do. I'm going to tell you all about that in a second. If you would like to contact me, I'm going to put it up here right now. It's email is bluebearsgames@gmail.com. The Facebook page is obviously Blue Bears Games. And if you really don't want to go through all that and you want to go the long route, put a message in the comments section below. Give me a way to contact you, and then we can talk from there. Pretty simple, pretty clear. All right? Any questions or concerns, don't care what time of day it is. If I'm asleep, I'm asleep. I'll get back to you, but I answer pretty quickly. On top of that, I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this deck is for sale. It is $40, just like all of my Commander decks. I'm actually talking to somebody right now about my Adelaide's deck. They want it upgraded. I have that as an option too. If you want some upgrades, we can talk about it. They are up on the Facebook Marketplace. If you need a link to it, go to my Facebook page on Facebook. Go to my Facebook business page, sorry. And there should be a link in one of the sections there that takes you to my Facebook Marketplace profile. And you can just search the name Dina and it'll come up. Or you can just buy it direct from me without going through that. You can just send me a message and say, hey, I want to buy it. I accept PayPal. I believe it's Venmo and Zelle. I accept a lot of them. And I'd actually prefer that just to keep everybody out of the business of, what I'm selling, but, whatever. And then we can go ahead and talk about it. So go ahead and do that if you do. If you know somebody who might be interested in something like this, let them know as well. Which brings me to my next thing. Please like the video. Thumbs up. Always good. Helps me get a little bit more of my information out there. Subscribe to the channel if you have not done so. If you don't know by now, I have I think it's 300 videos. A lot of them are videos like this. I have a lot of decks. I do a lot of deck videos. I'm free for a little bit, so I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of my own stuff, not somebody else's deck that I give you an unboxing upgrade guide for. So stay tuned for that. What else do I got? I've been busy this week. It's been a real busy week here at Blue Bears Games. This video will be on Christmas Eve, so that's a small present. On Christmas Day, if everything works out well, I have a bigger present for everybody. I don't do mail day videos, but I have a fan of the show who decided they wanted to do a trade, and they gave me a whole lot of stuff for a lot less than I sent them as an appreciation for what I do, and the box was a lot bigger than I was expecting it to be. So if I get everything right, that video will drop on Christmas Day as a little bonus to everybody, because it was a bonus to me, and technically it's in the same vein and spirit of Christmas. So wait for that. If it's not on that day, it will be sometime after. So Christmas is on Saturday, maybe Sunday or Monday, but it will be soon. So stay tuned for that. Other than that, I already actually liked the video. I actually just share it out to somebody. But if you want to share it out to somebody, this is what I wanted to talk about. Share it out to somebody who either likes my style of video and wants to watch more of what I do. I'm starting to find more and more people who do. Share it out to somebody who might want something like this deck or wants to build it on their own and wants some ideas. That's a great way to do it too. So either way, all three of those things will work for me, whatever. Other than that, I'm not going to take up any more of your Christmas Eve time. Enjoy your holiday. I will see you all just before the new year. Have a good one.